We need to support nationalist leaders who are trying to preserve and conserve our own cultures and identities to keep us from just being submerged beneath this, this great replacement where we're going to wind up as serfs in this global new world order. It's happening. And unfortunately, even among conservatives, we find ourselves deplatformed because we're not staying within the polite boundaries of acceptable speech.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
Yeah, this was a great segment. It's short, but following Vox Day is a challenge, but also a lot of fertile information and great ideas to expand on. Something that he mentioned was SJWs always lie. Social justice warriors always lie. Why is that? Well, both in Marxism and in Islamism, adherents are told, don't think about how it's going to work, just obey the rules. Smarter people than you have figured all of this out. In the case of the Quran, it's Allah and Muhammad. And in the case of socialism, it's Marx and Lenin. And you just need to be a good soldier. This is why SJWs don't have a problem with cognitive dissonance. It's obvious after more than a century that socialism doesn't work. It hasn't worked anywhere. The more socialist a country becomes, the poorer and less free it becomes. But it still appeals to people with, low educations and low IQs. This is why our elites want to flood both America and Europe with low IQ migrants, because they'll be easy fodder for leading them to socialism, or if they're already Muslims, then they're already fodder. They're self-identified volunteers, unless they were born into it, which I guess most of them were. But both in Islam and in socialism, both of these faiths, which they really are, socialism is absolutely a religion. It's a godless religion, but it's a faith. Both of them believe in what I call taqiyya, and for liberals, it's liberal taqiyya, which means that anything that you do to further the advance of socialism or Islam is good inherently. So you're allowed to lie. You should lie. You should lie about your intentions. You should lie about your methods, and it's very effective. The most important book that I've read probably in the last 5 years that I can even think of, nothing comes close. It's a few years old, and somehow I missed it. I read some of the reviews, but I didn't read it. It's called American Betrayal by Diana West, and it goes back to the beginning of the 20th century and shows how our country was really taken over from within, particularly during the Roosevelt administration. And that was when Roosevelt was surrounded by true Stalinists. It turned out later they were communists. They were Stalinist Soviet agents. And they worked all the way through the New Deal to make America as socialistic as they could, and in every chance and in every way to help Stalin spread communism. This is, beyond debate now. The book is an academic work, heavily footnoted. At the time, it was called, discounted as McCarthyism, the fact that this country was taken over from within. But she identifies where America really went off the rails. In 1933 and 34, we knew what communism was doing, that millions were being purged and murdered, that the terror famine was happening in Ukraine, and our leaders decided it was worth it to hide this because they didn't want people to be so turned off against communism that they would also reject socialism. Roosevelt and his people, and really continuing decade by decade until today, they believe in something called the Great Convergence. We'll take the best parts of capitalism and the best parts of communism, and we'll merge somewhere in a socialist form of government, run by socialist elites. And it's been very successful. I mean, just look at our universities today. It's been completely successful. Antonio Gramsci was an Italian communist in the early 20th century. He didn't believe that Lenin and Stalin were going to succeed with, brutal, invasive tactics. He believed in rotting the institutions from within and taking over every institution. It's called the long march through the institutions. And it's been highly successful. All you have to do is look at not only academia, our corporations are politically correct now. Institutions like the Boy Scouts, politically correct. We're really fighting a rear guard action now. And Vox Day was completely right. We need to support nationalist leaders who are trying to preserve and conserve our own cultures and identities to keep us from just being submerged beneath this, this great replacement where we're going to wind up as serfs in this global new world order. It's happening. And unfortunately, even among conservatives, we find ourselves deplatformed because we're not staying within the polite boundaries of acceptable speech. And talking about the great replacement or genocide of Europeans and Americans, it's not considered acceptable. We're supposed to, like Jordan Peterson said, take our pills and stay within the acceptable mainstream, be polite. Well, the problem is being polite keeps us on the fast track toward oblivion. We are being eradicated. I often ask the question, is it still called genocide if you're brainwashed into hating your own people before you're replaced and wiped out? If the people being eradicated, for example, in Sweden, if the people being replaced and eradicated are first made to hate themselves, does it still count as eradication? The one thing that I've learned in my life is that brainwashing absolutely works. And we need to resist this brainwashing, and we need to resist deplatforming people and other voices outside of the acceptable mainstream, because if we don't, we are going to find ourselves, on the last boxcar or in some kind of a zoo, because we are being wiped out. Our values, our culture, our peoples, our nations. The communists never quit. The socialists, they didn't surrender. We think we won the Cold War, but in effect, the communists got inside of our own system and turned us into pod people. We're now like replicant communists, spouting communist slogans, even while we hold up, our pocket constitutions. It's really been an amazing thing to watch. And I can only encourage people, please read Diana West's book, The American Betrayal, because it's nailed it closer than anything else that I've ever seen. And we are going to lose this war if we continue to play by the Marquis de Queensberry rules against people who are liars and cutthroats. I mean, this has gone to the extent that even our religious institutions have been taken over by Marxists. There's no doubt in my mind. This is what happened to my own church with the Pope. The previous Pope wasn't ill. He wasn't old. He didn't have dementia. He was forced out in a putsch by cardinals who were themselves covert socialists. So the tide is against us, and the time for being polite is over. Most of the conservatives within what I call, which folks call Conservatism Inc., they really don't care if we lose this war. All they care about is being invited on CNN next week. And to do that, they have to stay within the acceptable boundaries, not talk about the things that I've been talking about the last 10 minutes, because that's a sure way to be branded as alt-right, outside acceptable bounds. Well, we can't do that. We need to call traitors what they are, traitors. Stop being polite. Stop worrying about whether National Review will publish you or whether these other for-profit Conservatism Inc. websites will publish your columns. Forget it. Go outside of them. Appeal to people to go to places like InfoWars, to use free or free video sites like BitChute or Gab instead of Twitter and Facebook. As long as we're stuck using Twitter and Facebook, we're basically segregated to the back of the bus, but we're step and fetch it ideologically to the extent that we like the bus. It's a really nice bus. So we'll accept being throttled and shadow banned and pushed to the back of the bus. I say we need to support other avenues of thought like Gab, like BitChute, like InfoWars, so that we can continue to reach people. We're never going to reach people as long as we're just using things like Twitter, where if you speak too frankly, they'll turn you off, like they turned off Tommy Robinson, like they've shut down other people.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.